Right, all right, all right. Let's see. I'm gonna try this out. I'm not sure how this is gonna work, but we're gonna test it. Hi, friends. Oh, Uncle DJ joined. Hi, friends. Um, so I wanted to do a live stream, kind of centered around World Mental Health Day. I know that I posted earlier on here, but can you guys let me know whether you can hear me or not? I don't 100% sure know if the audio is working. I know that the video for sure is working, but if you could let me know, that'd be swell. Can you guys hear me? Yes, no. Maybe. Possibly. Cool. Sweet. Imani all the way out in Illinois can hear me. That's really awesome. All right. So, hi guys. My name is Jillian. I'm actually doing 2 lives in a week, which is pretty cool. I wasn't sure whether I was going to do this or not, and that's primarily because this has been something heavy on my heart for a while. With today being World Mental Health Day, I figured it'd be a perfect time to kind of share some of my story, to be able to articulate to everybody kind of how I've gone from one diagnosis to the next, and how I'm living on the other side of this now, as opposed to being kind of hidden behind closed doors about it. I'm a person who's not ashamed to say that I've dealt with mental illness and am now on the other side of it with mental wholeness. And I remember having a conversation a long time ago with a few friends, and I would always say the phrase, I have bipolar disorder, which meant that I viewed it as a gift. It was something that I could always give back at some point in time, as long as I took the steps to kind of dig through whatever it needed to be worked out. And that's something that I want to be able to kind of touch on today, that you guys can, if you have mental health capacities, that I want to be able to show you how I moved from looking at it from a victim's perspective to being fully confident in who I am and not looking at my disorder as something that would hold me back. It's something that actually pushes me forward. It's something that I use as a drive. Right now it looks like I'm having some issues. Technical difficulties. I'm sorry, you guys. Is everything okay? Can you hear me back now? Oh no. What happened? Okay. I don't know what happened. I'm hoping that my stream is running okay. I don't know. But here's to hoping. It looks like we ran into some technical difficulties, but that's what happens on live. So anyway, I'm going to kind of run through my stuff, and I tried doing this in a different format. Please, 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 if this gives any issues, let me know, and I will gladly try and find a method that works a little bit better. So anyway, mental illness, I think a lot of people have viewed it as a crutch, whether it's anxiety, depression, all of that. A lot of people have viewed it as a crutch rather than viewing it as something that can be beautiful. So I just want to make sure that I do my part on World Mental Health Day to improve that perspective. Cool. All right, so we're going to go to the next slide. So my story is something that I'm really excited to share. So my name is Jillian, and as soon as I figure out how to read my own slide, that'd be great. My name is Jillian. I just recently got married last 2 weeks ago, almost. I'm a soon-to-be mom. And I'm continuously healing from mental health. So about almost 10 years ago now, I was diagnosed properly with with the right mental health diagnosis. And so I'm going to kind of take you on this lovely little journey of how this all happened. Because again, a lot of times people get confused with different diagnoses, and I really highly encourage you to do some research on a lot of these things so that we can figure out what works best for you. Also, just want you to know I'm not an expert in the field. I am not a doctor. I'm not any kind of medical authority on this. So I just want you to take this with, this is my story. This is how I went through this. This is how I've transitioned out of it, and kind of how I'm navigating the waters now. So at age 12, there was a bunch of stuff that happened to me, and it kind of happened in my life simultaneously. I lost a very close family member, and had just been going through a lot of just really traumatic events, not just from the loss of a family member, but transitioning schools and being in a different environment, and just things that weren't dealt with. And because I had been going through so much transition and having to deal with, loss and grief at such a young age, I just had a lot of unique symptoms to a 12-year-old. So extreme depression, that's for sure. And then they had given me some medication, and there was a lot of self-harming behaviors, and it just wasn't pretty. But because I was so young, they wanted to be able to kind of help reel in, and I say they as like my mental health care team. So the team wanted to help bring in the depression, so that way I wouldn't be kind of, I don't know, sad anymore. I would potentially be able to focus in school a lot better. That didn't really go over so well. And at the end of the day, it just kind of, it was not good. So when we figured all of that out, we kind of after trial and error, I was a guinea pig for about 7 years, until at age 19, I was properly diagnosed with bipolar type 1 with psychosis. This is a very severe form of mental illness. It's just as bad for some people as having either schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder. It's very intense. So bipolar, for anybody who doesn't really know what that is not necessarily two opposing um, uh, feelings, but it's something, because a lot of times we'll say, oh, the weather is bipolar, or people are unstable, and all of these things. Bipolar, by clinical definition, is manic depression, which means that I would have episodes of mania, which could look like extreme shopping sprees and spending money that I didn't have, and then having buyer's remorse later on down the line. Extremely overactive, having delusions of grandeur, and kind of flying off the charts. Just for all intents and purposes, hypersexuality. All of those things encompass mania. And then there would be extreme bouts of depression. And depression doesn't just manifest itself as sadness, it manifests itself as loss of interest, hopelessness, withdrawal from activities. Like, from a clinical perspective, that's what it was. On the inside, it felt like I was dying and I was crazy. I very much so remember the time of being 19 and getting the diagnosis. It was extremely scary. I was living on my own when I did get the diagnosis, and I had called up some friends of mine in the middle of the night because I had about 2 hours before been in a Target in a shopping cart, pushing myself around with a broomstick, because I thought that was normal. It's not normal. And it's okay that it was not normal. But I didn't know that it was not normal. And the people who I was with didn't really understand it either. And then about the time that I was making this phone call, I called up the friend and I was just broken on the inside. So not 2 hours before, I was extremely running around like a crazy person, literally like I was 2 years old in a Target, as if I was, I don't know, surfing up and down the aisles. I don't know. It was really weird. And then in that same couple of hours later, I was weeping on the floor that somebody had to come to my house, come get me, pick me up, and take me to be with them for the weekend because they were very scared. And rightfully so, because it was a very scary situation. Bipolar type 1 with psychosis, it's two very extreme clinical sides of the spectrum. So you get both the high highs and the low lows, and they happen all year round. My cycles were about 90 days. So literally every season I was kind of like two people, and I would see things or hear things. And it was very scary because I didn't feel like I could tell anybody about this. Kind of the fact that I could see and hear things, because again, it just sounds really crazy, but it was a symptom that I had of a much deeper issue. And it's something that if you're not well educated on it, it just doesn't help anybody else around you because you can't tell them what your needs are. And that's kind of where I was. I literally thought my life was over. And that was something that I think my mom and dad will tell you, because they dealt with it more than anybody else. I know that my cousins kind of dealt with it, and some family members. But I literally just, that diagnosis not only made the most sense, but it was also the scariest thing, because I had to come into this perspective of, from a clinical standpoint, something's wrong. I need to get help. how do I do this? And nobody's walked this road before me. For all intents and purposes, people who are bipolar, or have bipolar disorder, I had never experienced somebody who was married after having the diagnosis. They usually get the diagnosis after marriage. I'd never experienced somebody who had had children after having the diagnosis. They usually have children before, and then they're on lithium for the rest of their life, and are never able to have children, who lived normal lives and were not in and out of hospitals. That's why I thought my life was over. That's why I thought that there was no hope, because I was going to be this person who had to pop a pill the rest of their life, go and sit on a couch and explain to whomever I was seeing for mental health therapy that something's wrong, you can't fix it, you'll never be able to fix it, it just kind of is what it is. And that's what I was told as well. I'm one of the few patients, if not the only patient, that my counselor, I've seen a clinical therapist for a long time. No, they're not Christian, but they've helped me with a lot of what I've gone through, and I'll explain more about that later. But they helped me find coping skills that eventually down the line has now got me to the other side of that, where now I'm no longer on medication. I see counselors seasonally as needed, or I go and I get help seasonally as needed. It's not a every 2 weeks type thing anymore. And my counselor literally said to me, I've never seen anybody like you where you're thriving. They said, we hear about patients that it could happen, but you're the only person who we've seen come into this clinic and leave out of here. And had we not experienced some of this with you, we would have never known that you had bipolar disorder. Because by all intents and purposes, people think I'm super joyful, and I'm not. There's some days that it has taken me to get to this point, like I am now for the past almost 2 years now, but on the other side of this. But for a little over 10, 11 years, I was in turmoil with this diagnosis. So I lived in denial, very much so. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I avoided the counselor as much as possible. I avoided facing the symptoms, even though they were staring me straight in the face. And I further put myself into difficult situations. My mom is, let me tell you, that woman is a saint for various reasons, but especially because she's one of the people that could recognize the signs and symptoms ahead of time, because she took the time to educate herself on them. And she would say things like, hey, are you okay? And that usually was her way of signaling, you probably need to get some extra help. How can I help you? And I would avoid it. And her things were that she would see, my room was a hot mess. To your average person, that may not be that big a deal, but my husband knows I'm very anal retentive about organization. I'm very detail oriented. I'm very, things have to be in a schedule and a set line. And when my schedule would get out of whack or my room would get all crazy, she knew that that's where my mind was. And I avoided at all costs trying to face that fact, which made it difficult, because not only am I no longer facing the symptoms and I'm avoiding talking to people about it, I would get on this whole, yeah, I'm great, I'm fine, except I'm not. Again, feeling like I'm dying on the inside because I'm hallucinating both auditory and visual. I'm feeling like nobody in the world wants me, nobody cares about me, I'm useless. It's a lot of things. And so it took some time to get to a better standpoint. So before I get to the next slide, just want you guys to be aware that if anything dealing with self-harm or suicidal completion or suicidal attempts bothers you. There's no imagery, but I am going to be talking about it, just so that you guys can be aware if this is where you want to check out for about 3 or 4 minutes. I want to be sensitive to that, just because, again, this is World Mental Health Day. Got to be sensitive. So I'll give you about a minute or so if you want to check in. Uh-oh. Interrupting a little bit. We good? Do we have some? Are we good? I just saw that comment. Can I get a thumbs up? A text from somebody? Something. We solid? Cool. All right. Sweet. Okay. So on to the next slide. Becoming a danger to myself. So very much so, I was a danger to myself. I had no will to live. I remember the day that I went into my counselor's office after a very botched suicidal attempt, but it was not good. And he said that he looked into my eyes after kind of all of the dust had settled, and he asked me straight up, do you want to live? And I said, no. And he said, the scary part is I can see that. And sometimes when people are wanting to take their own lives, sometimes it's just a cry for attention, and sometimes they're really at that juncture. And that's kind of where I was. This wasn't, I want to say, even any longer than 3 or 4 years ago. But it's something that was very real and very scary to my entire care team, to my family, to people who may or may not have known me. There was an impact that I left on their lives of not just the joy that I brought, but also the very raw, tender reality of you can look so perfect on the outside but have zero desire to continue forward. And I was upfront about that. And I didn't really hide anymore. Being a danger to myself was not okay. You know, I was hiding in plain sight. You could literally look at me and think that everything was great and all together because I went to concerts, I hung out with friends, you know, to try and stave away stuff. And I'd come home and I'd cry. Or I'd come home and I'd literally tear my room apart to try and find this one thing to make me feel good or what have you. And it was very, very scary. Overspending to the point where I'm now paying for it. You know, I'm so far into debt that it's not cute. It's gotten better, but it was like something that like I was really gone. You know, maxing out credit cards, buying, returning very expensive items. There were some risky behaviors involved, you know, whether it was, you know, alcohol was a thing. Obviously, like when you're 21, it's like a rite of passage, so it feels. But for me, it became something that was very volatile at that point. So it was just ugly for a period of time. And becoming a danger to myself, I think when I hit rock bottom, about 2 years ago, I decided that I didn't want to be that person anymore. And that was not who I wanted to be. That was not anything of what I ever dreamed of my life. But about 2.5 years ago in December, actually it'll be 3 years ago in December, I had hit rock bottom. I was in a mental health institution, and I remember my mom and dad, my best friend, had brought into this mental health hospital a Bible for me, right? I don't know, you guys are like, for those who aren't faith believers, it's going to sound really, really crazy, but it's a thing that worked for me. Sometimes you have to hit your lowest point, and that's what really saved me. So they brought in a Bible, and my best friend dropped off a devotional, and my parents had Christmas with me in the hospital because I was that far gone. And I came home, I think, like the day before New Year's. Sirens going by. I came home the day before New Year's. My cousin came and picked me up from the hospital, and it was a very quiet ride. And at that point, it was something that I realized I didn't want to go back to that place anymore. And going back to that place meant I didn't want to be eternally sad and faking it in front of people. I didn't want to be eternally anxious about every little thing because I made dumb decisions or I wasn't facing my own fears or my own trauma or whatever the case is, and not talking to people about it. I didn't want to be that person or go back to that space anymore where my life was in complete disarray, but to the outside, it looked like I had everything together. And that was just a very firm thing. It was not an overnight change, but it's something that I stopped fooling around of just going to counseling or just taking a pill so that way I could appease people. Because one, that's a waste of money. Your counselor and the pills are not going to, you're wasting money, okay? But two, also, the fact that I felt very fake and I wanted to be very real. And kind of even in doing this broadcast, this live stream situation, I didn't want to do this because of the fact that this has been very much so heavy on me to do for a while. But it's scary to expose yourself, and it's scary to be real and authentic with people on a very sensitive topic that not a lot of people want to touch on, both in a faith community as well as in a community of color, because why do you gotta go to the counselor and pay the counselor when you've got friends around you? Why do you have to, take a pill when, you're, you can just turn it off? Why can't you just be happy? Why can't you just be, not worried about those things? And like, people will throw scripture at your face or will throw cliches in your face and say to you, just power through it, or just get through it, or buck up buttercup. That wasn't helpful either. So today was something that I wanted to be able to articulate to you guys, that this road for the past couple of years was not pretty. Even in once I did kind of start to make a decision that I wanted to no longer be bound to the diagnosis any longer. Making that decision about 3 years ago was one small decision that I had to make a small decision the next day, a small decision the next day, a small decision the next day, to actively participate in my treatment plan, to actively talk to people about what was bothering me, to actively seek help where I needed help. And that was just a very real thing. So here's some of the things that helped me. This wasn't an overnight process. It's something that took some time. And I put diet change and exercise in there because I was, right now I'm just carrying a lot of baby weight. For a while, it was actually really, really big. I topped in almost 220 pounds at my heaviest, and lost a significant amount of weight. And as I was losing the physical weight, the emotions came off. So I'll just kind of go in order and how these things changed. My perspective on my diagnosis, and how it even got me from just a diagnosis to now being kind of like the poster child of what happens when you do the work. So medication, I explained earlier in the live stream that at 12 I was misdiagnosed and I was a guinea pig. At 19, when I was properly diagnosed, they went through several different market changes as to whatever the standard was for bipolar disorder, but one thing that I was adamant about is that I did not want to be on lithium as the method, which had put me in a position of, I'm not going to try everything else. Trying everything else is not fun. That meant with trying everything else, I've done Abilify, I've done Seroquel, I've done Latuda, I've done everything, right? So you name it, I've tried it. It kind of worked, it kind of didn't work. So much so that I was on a medication therapy for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. It was a very therapeutic level that made me function until one day I became allergic to it. Don't know how, but as a result of me becoming allergic to this particular medication dosage that I had, they tried titrating me off. Instead, they just had to pull me off completely because I was in the hospital because I couldn't breathe. That was not fun. That's kind of where doing the work really had to come into play, because at that juncture, I remember it was, I think, like fall of 2017 or something like that, that when I was pulled off of the medication, I said, you know what, let me try doing these steps that the counselor taught me about in order for me to successfully stay off of medication. If I can do this well with going to counseling and making some other life choices that were going to be healthier for me, let me do that. And so that's what I did. So I went and I saw my counselor, which required me to face my past traumas, which means that there was a lot of things that I had to deal with that weren't just for me anymore. I had to learn how to forgive people, how to let go of stuff, how to not be burdened by when other people pissed me off because they made me mad or whatever. And I'm not blaming other people, as I needed to take ownership for my own actions. So that started with dealing with the trauma, that I had to accept that a lot of the things that there's a lot of people who've said, hey, you know, God is such a good God, why do all of these bad things happen? And everybody has free will, right? Me believing that God is a good God also means that in his goodness, I've had to believe that he gave me, you know, the mental health diagnosis that I had. And I had to work through that. And I had to work through the circumstances that I said happened to me, but really they were happening for me. And it's interesting because a lot of people have said to me, who know deeper levels of my story from kind of the things that I've endured, have said, you are such a strong person. And if I were you, I would have been dead by now. Quite frankly, I should have been dead by now, but I'm not. I am still here because I've decided that, not just that I've decided, but that God gave me a second chance in order for me to be able to sit here and tell you my story. Not only am I able to sit here and tell you my story from the comforts of my home with a baby onesie hanging behind me, which is a whole testimony in and of itself, I'm also able to articulate to you that if you do the work, it will be okay. And I'm now 3 years clear and free of any episodes, any incidents, anything. 2 years of that, no medication. And as a result of this, I'm able to be in a much more joyful, empowering place to tell you, you can do it too, sis, right? Or you can do it too, bro. Like, and let you know that you don't have to be bound to that. So that's why I believe God is a good God, because in all of the tragedy, I found such joy on the other side of that. Earlier, I also talked about diet change and exercise. I lost about 60, 70 pounds in about a year. And that was primarily emotional weight, some of it water weight from the medication. But it made me feel better because I could look in the mirror and be like, I look great. And it's just a thing, right? That you can do, and exercising from even like a clinical standpoint. They say if you're depressed, go outside and walk, because the endorphins that come out of it make you feel so much better. And it's true. I find that I laugh a lot more. Even if I'm frustrated at the trainer or something and I want to punch the trainer in the face, at the end of it, I'm grateful because I never regret going to the gym. I always regret not going to the gym. I'll repeat that one more time. I never regret going to the gym. I always regret not going to the gym. I always regret not making the right food choice. I never regret making the right food choice. I always regret not going to counseling. I never regret going. And even when I was on medication, I always regretted not taking the medication. But I never regretted taking it at the time when I needed it. Medication and counseling and diet change and exercise and facing your traumas and journaling and creativity and all of that, those are tools in your tool belt. They are not going to be the thing that cures you. Your will, your stamina, your ability to embrace who you are, whoever you believe your higher power to be, however they created you, that is what cures you. Your will to live is what cures you. But you need some tools in order for you to be able to build this will, this stamina, this endurance to be quote unquote cured. And it is not an overnight process. I have a very unique situation in the fact that I ended up allergic to the medication, which is where my doctor had to pull me off of the medication. It doesn't mean that I wasn't taking it. I obviously was taking it. That turned into an allergic reaction. I highly encourage you that if your medication is your tool, continue using it and have conversations with your care team in order to be able to determine whether that's going to be a continued step in your tool belt. If you have a counselor, stopping counseling altogether is not going to be helpful if it's working right now. That's a tool in your tool belt. If your diet, whatever that looks like, you need to talk with your care team to determine if your diet needs to change, if exercising is something that will cause it to change for the better. And then the last thing that I really want to emphasize is community. So before I start taking a bunch of questions and stuff, I really want you to know that transparency is everything. It is something that if you are not in a community where you're able to be transparent, if you're not in an area where you can talk to somebody, and a community doesn't need to be 40, 50, 60 people. A community is being with people who will love you and support you exactly where you're at. And that means for me, especially recently with being married, but even when I was going into dating relationships, I knew a relationship wasn't going to work out if when I told them that I had a diagnosis, that they were running from me or that they wanted to fix me, because I'm not broken and you're not broken either. I really want to emphasize you're not broken. And a community is supposed to suspend you and hold you up and to help love on you in times where you don't feel like you're lovable, and to help you continue forward and move forward. A community is not there to tear you down. It's not meant to make you feel less than. It's not meant to make you feel like there's a lot of things that a community is not meant to do, but what it is meant to do is love you no matter what. Listen when you raise your hand, and give you encouragement all the time. Sometimes encouragement does not look like what you think it's supposed to look like. Sometimes encouragement is that you are being told a very harsh truth in a very loving way. And sometimes encouragement is You're being told, hey, I want to be able to help you. Let me get you to a mental health facility that may be best suited for you. Hey, I love you enough so that way we can sit and do a budget together, because it's sometimes as simple as that. Or, hey, I love you enough that I'm seeing that you're low. Let me take you out for coffee. Or your community doesn't need to spend $1 billion on you. Your community needs to spend their heart on you. And I need you to understand that. I don't know who's watching still or who's not watching. But I want you to know that I'm very blessed because not a lot of people have the type of community that I have, but I also fought for it. I made sure that my voice was not silenced. So much so that whenever I do a live stream about something in the capacity of mental illness or mental health or what have you, my family knows, oh, well, there she goes again. Like, it's not a thing that scares them anymore. It's a thing that they've learned is just part of who I am. And it doesn't make me any less of a human. It's just, but it took time to build that. Like, I was misdiagnosed at 12, and people thought that I was crazy for 7 years up until I got a proper diagnosis at 19. And then they still thought I was crazy until I was 21 in my first hospital stay as an inpatient, that they had no clue what to do with me. Up until I was, 26, and they're still trying to figure out what the heck to do with me. They thought that I was crazy until I kept voicing it again and again. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's things that may be wrong with your environment, things that may be wrong with how you process things. You may need to brainwash yourself into positivity, whatever that looks like. But I just want you to be aware that your community shouldn't believe that there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There's just pieces of your life that need to be re-navigated and remapped. So that concludes my story, how I've gotten to where I am. I'm now, like I said, a poster child of what it would look like if you were to do the work. And like I said, it didn't take me overnight. I'm 3 years out from incidents and 2 years out from medication. And I still go and have it. I have people that I could call on standby, whatever that case is. And I have the best support system. And they know that even with pregnancy, it's a little bit crazy. But I've been tremendously blessed, and I want you to understand that it can be better. With that, my inbox is always open, and it's a little dangerous saying something in that capacity that my inbox is open, but it is. If you need guidance on how to approach the situation with friends or family or somebody who you're concerned about, if any of these things resonated with you either personally or you immediately thought, hey, I know somebody who is kind of fitting for this, feel free to reach out. I have a ton of resources that are ready and available to you. If personally you want to leave any final remarks in the comments section, there's a lot of comments that I didn't get to. Wow, family has been in here, lots of family. Thank you so much for showing up. Carlos, I see you in here. Yeah, my hope is that this video is a lifesaver. If you haven't shared it, I would highly encourage you to share this with your friends, your family. Obviously, this live stream is going to be up here forever. I'm going to try and download it and put it in YouTube for later usage. But I love you guys. And thank you so much again. Bye. Hopefully. if I can figure this out.